The year's almost over, now let's talk about some Steam Deck habits this year. We usually have two different sources to look at. The first source, of course, is Valve themselves. Today we're going to talk about the best of 2024 as per Valve, more specifically the Steam Deck section. But the other source is a pretty important source. It's the Steam Deck survey ran by Overkill.wtf. Every year they run a fairly popular Steam Deck survey, and if you fill it out, they compile your data and we get a bigger picture of the Steam Deck community. Albeit it is kind of biased because most people that are enthusiastic about the Steam Deck would fill these out, and it may not take into account the common folk, but it is still something nonetheless. Now back to Valve. Their Steam Deck section of the best of 2024 talks about the most played games on Steam Deck. And from what Valve says, their criteria is that any game is allowed on here as long as playtime was accrued on a Steam Deck. And here I'm going to assume Valve accrued Steam Deck playtime only because it wouldn't make sense otherwise, right? All data is gathered between January the 1st, 2024 and December the 15th, 2024. Your 12 most played games on Steam Deck as per Valve, and presumably in order, are Fallout 4, Hades, Dave the Diver, Balatro, Hogwarts Legacy, Cyberpunk 2077, Baldur's Gate 3, Palworld, Elden Ring, Vampire Survivors, Stardew Valley, and Grand Theft Auto 5. Some of these platinum hits are no-brainers like Hades, Dave the Diver, Balatro, Vampire Survivors, Stardew Valley, and yes, even Elden Ring. Elden Ring was basically like a killer app for the Steam Deck. People bought the Steam Deck to play Elden Ring on the go. Crazy, isn't it, right? And Fallout 4 being on top of the list probably has to do with the fact that the Fallout show came out, and it's a pretty darn good show if I do say so myself. So good that it actually beat Arcane Season 2 at the Game Awards, and honestly I was kind of surprised, but hey, it deserves it, right? What I do find interesting here is that Baldur's Gate 3 is on here despite the fact that Act 3 really doesn't run well on the Steam Deck. And it's a verifiably known fact that it doesn't run well on Steam Deck, showing that yes, there is a disconnect between the voices on the internet and the normal people that just don't browse the internet all that much. But Grand Theft Auto 5 being here is probably one of the sickest twists of the knife. See, Grand Theft Auto 5 worked quite well on Steam Deck until they implemented BattleEye, and in turn made it so that you can't play Grand Theft Auto 5 online on the Steam Deck. Now, granted, you can still play the single player just fine. Honest, Grand Theft Auto Online is the reason why people keep coming back to this game. As for Gold and Silver, I mean, there aren't any big surprises here. These are all great games that run pretty well on Steam Deck, all things considered. I suppose the only reason Hades 2 is below Hades 1 is because everyone kind of has Hades 1 already, whereas Hades 2 is still in early access after all. Without any hard numbers, it's difficult to illuminate any sort of trend besides the fact that people just play games on the Steam Deck. And they play whatever they want despite, some people saying that games don't work all that well on Steam Deck. Like, obviously, Act 3 of Baldur's Gate 3, or something like Black Myth Wukong. I think Black Myth Wukong doesn't run super well on Steam Deck, in my opinion. What I am curious about, though, is what happens between December the 16th and December the 31st. Do those just never get counted at all? What do those developers do? And yes, this isn't just a Steam Deck thingy, but there's a ton of different awards that you really should read for yourself. Like, did you know the highest selling game on Steam was Helldivers 2? But what comes after that? Well, I'm not going to tell you because you should check out the page yourself. Links in the description down below. Now let's talk about our other source of data, the Steam Deck Survey 2024. Overkill.wtf runs a Steam Deck survey every single year. The data gathering is a little different because, well, you have to manually go in and answer questions yourself. Valve, on the other hand, literally has the ability to just grab information off of your Steam account whenever they want, including Steam Deck metrics as well. But it's still valuable insight from what I would consider to be the more hardcore Steam Deck enthusiasts. Of course, one of my favorite questions is what type of Steam Deck did you buy? And it's pretty clear, according to this data, the most popular Steam Deck of choice was the 512GB OLED model. This can be explained by being both an OLED model, but also the cheapest OLED model as well. But the data points I want to talk about are, of course, how often people use a Steam Deck and how people use them. So the first question we want to look at is how many hours do people play with their Steam Decks on average? As you can see here, he compares 2022, 2023, and 2024, and the data suggests that people are using their Steam Decks more often each week, which is pretty good. And the top 10 Steam Deck games as per Overkill's audience is here, and as you can see here, Elden Ring is number 1, probably due to the expansion. But Vampire Survivors is no longer the most popular Steam Deck game, followed by Hades, followed by Balatro, Cyberpunk, Stardew Valley, Fallout 4, Baldur's Gate 3, Diablo 4, and Brotato. The inclusion of Balatro is unsurprising given how popular that game has become. And while their various different placements on this top 10 list are different from, say, Valve's own data, the games are pretty much the same. Elden Ring, Hades, Balatro, Cyberpunk, they're all up there. And while I don't personally do a lot of emulation these days, plenty of people buy the Steam Deck just for emulation. As you can see here, there's a lot of people that emulate, with most people apparently emulating PS2 games, arguably one of the greatest generations of all time. But I think one of the most significant data points is people's satisfaction with Valve's verification system. As someone that's heavily criticized the Steam Deck verification system, I'm proud to say that I'm not the only one with this opinion. Now, I would argue that this survey is probably more biased towards the experienced Steam Deck user, because around 82% of all participants recommend checking out ProtonDB for seeing if a game works well on Steam Deck. Which, I mean, to be fair, yeah, it's a great resource, but it's also not a resource that I would expect most newcomers to use. Now, these days, I don't see too many games that are marked as Steam Deck verified that don't work as expected, though I still see games that are marked as Steam Deck unsupported that work just fine on Steam Deck, and I can't seem to find any real reason why it would be marked as unsupported. But that's just me, I guess. But even those games that don't work that well on Steam Deck can be fixed via some tweaking, and ProtonDB users tend to post what they did to make games work. Now, here's a funny little tidbit. I often see people in the Steam Deck community, and even my own comments, wanting a Steam Deck Lite because they could make a Steam Deck that's smaller and thinner and lighter if they just got rid of those dang trackpads, right? Well, guess what? It seems like most Steam Deck users do use the trackpads. Now, I do have to preface this by saying the survey was probably filled in by more enthusiast Steam Deck users, so it's not surprising that they use the trackpads. But people want trackpads on these devices for a reason. And not just trackpads, mind you, they want trackpads that are Steam input capable. Now let's talk about performance, because it seems like people are a little limited by the Steam Deck's performance. Over half of survey respondents claim that they're disappointed by the Steam Deck's performance. 44% suggest that they are limited by the Steam Deck's performance, just a little bit, whereas 18% says they're limited by a lot. It does feel bad that there are games that released earlier this year that still don't run that well on Steam Deck, and, might never run well on Steam Deck. Like, for example, Dragon's Dogma 2. I really do like that game, even if it has a bunch of flaws. But one of the biggest flaws is that it doesn't really run that well on the Steam Deck. Heck, it doesn't really run that well on PCs in general. So that about wraps up the video. I think looking at this data was pretty fun. I mean, I had a lot of fun looking at it and trying to figure out what it all means. And it's interesting to see that most of the games that are most popular on Steam Deck have been popular on the Steam Deck for basically forever, to be honest. Like Vampire Survivors is still very popular despite, being there since the very beginning. Says a lot about the game itself, doesn't it? If you like this video, please press the like button and check out our other videos, and if you like those other videos as well, be sure to press the subscribe button and share the good gospel of high-tech lowlife with your friends. Furthermore, we have a community Discord for enlightened individuals such as you. And if you wish to further support high-tech lowlife, be sure to check out our Patreon page. Links in the description.